Okay, so members, we're at item number 4 on the agenda. Can I refer everybody to draft minutes at proceedings at page 112 of the pack? Are members content the draft minutes of the meeting 18th of April are a true reflection of the proceedings? I need somebody to say content.
Content.
Thank you. Everybody. 5 matters arising. Can I just refer everybody?
Just when you're coming in for matters arising.
Okay. Page 121 to 185 of the meeting papers. Further evidence has been received from the World Alliance for Mercury-Free Dentistry in response to costs cited by the Department for Health during its oral session on the 18th of April in relation to mercury regulation. Are members content that the evidence is forwarded to the Department of Health for comment on the issues raised in respect of the calculation of costs for transitioning the reimbursement from amalgam to composite fillings? Okay. Are members content that the further evidence and any response from the department is published on this committee's website?
Content.
Okay, David?
Just checking if there had been any response from the Cabinet Office after the no.
Okay, so moving on to item 6, Regulation EU 2024-1143 on geographical indications for wine, spirit drinks and agricultural products, as well as traditional specialities guaranteed and optional quality terms for agricultural products. Relevant papers are at page 5 to 110 of the meeting pack and the table pack for the assessment of the impact provided by the Department of Agriculture, Environment and Rural Affairs. Policy on geographical indications is a reserved matter and the responsibility of the British Government. In light of this, the Department has said that it has not undertaken a full assessment of impact. It has, however, said that a full assessment has been requested from the British Government. Just as a reminder, the approach that we have agreed and communicated to departments is that, irrespective of whether a matter is devolved or reserved, the department needs to provide us with its assessment of its impact. In this case, and in all others, we ask the following specific questions. Does it appear likely that the application of the Replacement EU Act would have a significant impact specific to everyday life of communities here in a way that is liable to persist? And also, does it appear likely that not applying the Replacement EU Act would have a significant impact to everyday life of communities here in a way that is liable to persist? So the department in this case doesn't appear to have answered these questions directly. It says in its response that it understands that the Replacement Act consolidates and harmonises the GI legislation and largely rolls forward the existing provisions for the EU GI scheme for it to continue to operate here as it currently does. It has advised that we currently have 4 GIs, Loughney pollen, Loughney eels, New Season Cumber potatoes and Armagh Bramley apples, and 4 All-Ireland GIs, Irish cream liqueur, Irish poaching, Irish whisky and Irish grass-fed beef. It notes that a study carried out by the European Commission in 2017 found that the sales value of PGI meat products was on average 1.2 times the sales value of comparable standard products without a GI label. So can I refer members to page 96 of the meeting pack, specifically to the paragraph in a letter from the department to the Lord's EU Scrutiny Committee, which details comments made by officials here in relation to the May 22 explanatory memorandum. The assessment received from officials does not reflect any of that. So it seems that they've given more information to the EU Scrutiny Committee than they have to ourselves. So the department officials were asked to attend the meeting today and be prepared to come forward from the public gallery to answer any questions members may have had or to provide clarity if needed to assist the committee in making a decision on whether to conduct an inquiry. Officials declined on the basis that the matter under consideration is a reserved matter. As I said earlier, the fact that it's
Sorry, they declined?
They declined, yeah. So the fact that this is a reserved matter is irrelevant in terms of the department assessing the impact of regulation and telling the committee if it will have an impact on the sectors for which it has responsibility. And it's clear from the Lord's correspondence that they do have views other than what is included in the assessment submitted. So having regard to whether there is a significant impact specific to everyday life of communities here in a way that is liable to persist is an essential part of the committee's decision making on whether to hold an inquiry. The regulations make that clear. So this is information that we need to support us in our decision making. The response from the department isn't what is expected, and it's hard to give consideration whatsoever to the impact of the regulation we will have here on that basis. If it had done so, it should be telling us what the assessment is. So, in accordance with paragraph 8 of the Windsor Framework Democratic Scrutiny Regulation 2024, the committee must decide today whether or not to hold an inquiry into the published Replacement EU Act that has been notified. Should the committee fail to decide, the failure will be treated as a decision not to hold an inquiry. So that's a lot of me talking about not having the information from the department. So, but we still have to make our decision today. I'm happy to take any questions before we come to that. David?
I just want to thank you for sharing that, Chair. I think it's completely unacceptable the way in which DARE have acted in this process. We've expressed concerns to this committee on a number of occasions that submissions from departments, we don't want to be informed by politics, but and certainly they should have appropriate detail and information to allow this committee to carry out its role. We might otherwise have raised concerns about the submission anyway, but actually to have demonstrated that they are not giving us what they should by giving more information to the House of Lords Committee, I think is just unbelievable. So I just want to put on record that we find that outrageous as well. I think when it comes to the decision, I'll come to that, but we'll probably look at having an inquiry. And if we do decide that as a committee to have an inquiry, I would expect that DARE fully engages with that process and does then bring forward its views and assessment of the issue.
So I'm just allowing people to come in and express an opinion before I ask the question.
Yeah, that's okay. Yes. No, thanks, Chairman. Thanks very much indeed for outlining very clearly where the situation is. Like the Vice Chair, I'm very surprised that DARE has declined to make a comment. Bearing in mind the remit of the committee and the importance that's been laid out by all the ministers in the executive about making sure that we follow the provisions of the Windsor Framework to this extent, I am particularly surprised that the Agriculture Minister has allowed that to go through, because we should actually, the officials should be here in front of us, because one of the issues that we have is that we can only make our decision based on sufficient information. We don't have the information. We don't have the expertise within this committee, so we have to use whatever is available within the Northern Ireland Executive and the Northern Ireland Government to do that. You wrote very eloquently to sort of the Executive Office saying about sort of lack of resources and what we're doing. So again, this is an administrative failure, and I think we should be highlighting that very clearly to the Agriculture Minister and indeed to the Executive Office, that we're not going to be able to do our job if it's not up to them to decide whether they come to this committee or not on these issues. It's up to us. So I'm very, very disappointed about that. I just want to put those remarks on record and the rest of it. But as to the sort of the other issues to do with it, I mean, I've probably indicated to you, I don't have enough information to make a decision on this. I just quite frankly don't know. So, yeah.
Well,
thank you, Chair. I just wanted to come in on that point. There's no doubt that DARE is a stakeholder in terms of this regulation, but it isn't the department with primary responsibility for GIs and for that policy area. It sits with DEFRA. And so I don't agree. I think it's a bit of an obtuse comparison to compare stakeholder evidence provided to a committee in the Lords versus a position where we're expecting DARE to be the ultimate arbiter and ultimate authority on an issue which isn't under their direction and control. And I think DEFRA is actually the primary place where we should be seeking that clarity and information. We're also in a different political context in May 2022 before this committee existed to where we are now, and I think that has to be reflected. I think this committee sits in a fairly clunky place, and it doesn't really have any clear lines of authority in terms of who exactly it's holding to account or where it gets its information from, and absolutely those administrative issues need to be addressed. But in fairness, I don't think we can expect DARE to come to this committee and be the ultimate arbiter in terms of an area that they actually don't have any decision-making control or authority over.
Clerk,
I just want to clarify a point that page 26 was referred to, and that is actually the department's comments that it gave to on the Westminster explanatory memorandum, and it was just referenced then in correspondence to the EU Lords Committee. So just to correct that.
Okay. So, I suppose on that point, Owen, I mean, this committee has a number of procedures. We're guided by those. One is a legal assessment of any new or proposed EU legislation, and the other is information from the department, and by the department we mean an executive department, on the impact of or any potential impact that a new regulation may or may not have. So DAERA does have a responsibility to this committee in terms of us following our procedures. Now, what we have previously suggested in terms of policies is that we would invite that officials from whichever department would come and sit in the public gallery, and then should there be any questions, they would be coming forward. And in the short time that we've been operating, that has been the case, and it isn't the case today. So we may just have to tighten up our proposals moving forward. So if nobody has any... Oh, sorry, Joanne.
Yeah, Chair, you've kind of covered it off. I suppose the issue here is that DEFRA's indicated there's no issue, but we need our own departments. This is not having a go at DAERA. This is in terms of the general principles. There is an expectation amongst all of us, the executive officer included, that the departments will show up and give an assessment. We can't do our work because we need them to give an assessment about Northern Ireland in a way that DEFRA will not. DEFRA hasn't conducted its investigations. It didn't even respond or send out to stakeholders. So we need, and our legal advice is there's a significant impact. So, you know, I think it's poor form.
No, that's okay.
I think it's poor form on the part of the department to not weigh in. We need their advice on this. They're the ones with the expertise. They're the ones with the contacts. It's a poor show, and I think that we need to be writing to the executive office to say there is an expectation that departments will show up. We don't know that this was a ministerial decision not to send officials, but it is not for officials to say, yeah, we're not coming. Absolutely not.
I mean, I think that's the key point. DEFRA has a responsibility, but the departments here have the responsibility for outlining the impact here, and that's the key point that's missing. Declan?
Yeah, when we had the executive office officials in before, we talked with them about the presentation of information to the committee, and at that point we had identified anomalies and inconsistencies in what was being brought forward, and I remember asking if there was a focus being taken to ensure consistency, that the same kind of mechanisms were in place in each department to resource delivery of the same approach. And the colleagues who attended advised that they were optimistic that was in play. So I do think we need to go back to the executive office with reference back to that previous conversation, but specifically in relation to this matter, where there has been a clear breakdown, whether it is administrative or whether it relates to someone simply taking it upon him or herself to dismiss this request. And maybe exceeding their authority in the process, and maybe that's an organisational dysfunction, but it certainly does not serve the purpose of this committee, and it's a failure in that regard. So I would advocate that we engage directly with the executive office through yourself and the committee clerk to get an assessment of the degree to which our expectation of consistent presentation of information from all departments has now been doubled down upon, and that there's a clear understanding across all departments that where there is a requirement for officials to attend this committee to provide additional information, that that is understood as a requirement. Otherwise, we'll continue to find ourselves hamstrung. You're in a very awkward position this morning because while we've received our legal advice. We now don't have a level of input from the department, and in some ways it places you between a rock and a hard place. We need to find ways to close down those kind of gaps and anomalies for future reference. Otherwise, we'll be saddled with an inability within the committee to properly assess issues and then make good decisions. And the whole question of inquiries, I think, is a very important device and facility to maximise the democratic scrutiny function of this committee. But equally, it has to be done in a proportionate way. We can't be running chasing our tails with a committee on every occasion where there appears to be an information gap or a legal lacuna. We need to be running inquiries when we know that there is a logic and a purpose to having an inquiry, and potentially we could make a decision today to have an inquiry on an issue which in actual fact is not an effective use of the time and the energy and the resource of this committee. There will be other occasions up the road, I'm sure, where we will require to convene inquiries, but we equally have to do that in a proportionate and an orderly way to maximise the remit of the committee in a constructive manner. And our problem today is I don't think we can really answer that, and fundamentally it comes down to the fact that we don't have officials in the room who could have assisted us in making the correct decision, and it is a DERA issue, it's not a DEFRA issue.
Yep. Jonathan?
Thank you, Chair, and I'll not detain. I share concerns of members that have expressed difficulty in assessing the impact based on lack of information. I think that's one issue. Taking aside those of us that maybe have issue with the scope and change within the proposed change and EU regulation. So I suppose probably what I would just like to just for clarity, there's nothing in regulation that prevents DERA from presenting to the committee and assessing the impact of this regulation just because they claim that it's a reserved matter and therefore not their responsibility. I'm just getting clarity on that point.
No, it being a reserved matter is irrelevant to them following the procedures from this committee and providing us with the information.
Okay, thank you. That's question answered.
Owen, you wanted to come back in?
Yeah, no, thank you, Chair. I wanted to ask a question, and that is, I mean, are we able to, or has there been a request made for DEFRA to give evidence? Because I understand what Joanne has said about there is a local element that we need to get clarity on, but DEFRA on reserved matters should be properly considering the impact in Northern Ireland and should be able to articulate evidence on that basis. And I understand a reserved matter does not mean that a department is precluded from giving evidence, and I completely accept that point. But there's also an issue, I mean, just as in the past, I think it's been said in this committee, there are issues around capacity and resourcing. For us as a committee, there will be questions around capacity and resourcing for executive departments in terms of their ability to provide meaningful analysis of some of these issues coming through. And I just think in our approach, we need to be cognizant of that as well.
And that's a fair point. But the fact that the department have given the EU committee information that they actually haven't given us, it kind of contradicts, it's not the capacity that, they have information, they just haven't provided it to us.
Just not bothered.
Do you want to come in on that?
Yeah, I just want to say that if the committee does decide to conduct an inquiry, there's an obligation on it to consult or to engage, have substantial engagement. I can't remember quite the term, but with the UK government. So that will follow. But unfortunately, it's in this stage where we were notified, or the committee was notified last week. We're coming here. The committee doesn't have the updated explanatory memorandum, so that's why there is the dependence on local departments.
So I know there are a number of people. What I'm actually going to do is cut this part of the conversation because we have to make a decision first of all about we haven't inquiry. Jonathan, is it important to this?
Just on the clerk's point there, because I think that was an important clarification, and just for the purposes of the committee, if we go to inquiry, will we possibly face this same situation again, where maybe the likes of DERA don't engage with the inquiry, or what is the legalities around that?
They're due to come next week. I mean, if we hold an inquiry, the department have to come and provide evidence. So, and in terms of the conversation that we've had, I'm going to come back to it after we make a decision about whether we have an inquiry about how we could potentially, I mean, given some of the comments that members have made, that we tighten up our procedures for this part of our processes. So if people are happy, I'm going to ask the question about an inquiry. So having had regard to the legal advice on whether it appears likely that the replacement EU Act significantly differs in whole or in part from the content or scope of the EU instrument which it replaces, and the departmental initial assessment on whether it appears likely that the Replacement Act would have a significant impact specific to everyday life of communities here in a way that is liable to persist, can I ask, do members wish to hold an inquiry into Regulation EU 2024-1143 on geographical indications for wine, spirit drinks and agricultural products, as well as traditional specialities guaranteed and optional quality terms for agricultural products, amending Regulation EU 1308/2013, EU 2019/787 and EU 2019/1753, and repealing EU Regulation EU 1151/2012.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so that's the decision made then to have an inquiry. That decision will be published on our website. Can I, on the basis of that, can I ask members to consider and agree the inquiry timeline, which is at page 106, draft 106, which includes an oral evidence session with departmental officials next week, 9th of May. Can I seek agreement for views on the Act via Citizen Space Survey from the key representatives of businesses and civil society, which have been identified by Raise at page 107 of the meeting pack, with a closing date of 13th of May 2024. The Citizen Space Survey will be promoted on social media platforms and that anyone will be able to respond, so that'll be promoted. Then, John, just seek agreement in line with agreed procedures, views on the EU Act and its impact on communities here, and details of the position in England, Scotland, Wales will be requested from the British government. Okay, Joanne.
Yeah, just in terms of the proposal, Chairman, just the list of bodies and organisations that Raise has cited. Do we have any producers? Are we clear about that? Because it seems to me we're going to umbrella groups, but there may be people, we had circumstance a couple of weeks ago where people were giving consideration to moving into the organic feed market. So there could be circumstances like that. Are we moving? We have a number of producers of spirits and so on in Northern Ireland. So can we include them?
I mean, go ahead, Claire.
I suppose the list, as you say, they are the umbrella bodies, and I would imagine that all of those producers engage or involved with these umbrella bodies, and also the Citizen Space Survey will be promoted widely on social media platforms. But if you have anybody in mind, you could propose that we contact them directly as well.
Well, I don't have a full list. I'm conscious that the last time, whenever we discussed organic feed, the department were the ones who had a list of people who were potentially engaging in that. But they didn't come to us today, so we don't know. But I think that, I don't know, not everybody always engages with umbrella bodies. That's my fear, that we could omit somebody. You know, I mean, we don't have that many people who produce spirits and so on in Northern Ireland, but there are some. And I think that we should be able to consult with them directly to establish, because the other side of that is their opinion. The umbrella body might reflect it, but they also may hold minority opinions within the umbrella body, and would be as well to get as much information as we can.
Yeah. But I'm not sure what it is you're suggesting we do, Joanne.
I'm suggesting that we actually contact the people who produce spirits in Northern Ireland.
Through.
So you'd write to Bushmills or Diageo or Copeland or like that,
Yeah.
rather than just to the
The umbrella bodies. I mean, it's not limitless. We've got a limited number of suppliers and producers in Northern Ireland, but we should contact them because they're the ones going to be impacted.
I mean, I'm easy. I mean, we're doing it through their groups. We're going to promote it on social media. I'm pretty sure after this committee, the media might do some promotion, all work for us as well. But I mean, I'm happy enough if we have a list of groups and I don't know how short or wide that list is.
I mean, would you be content that research is asked to identify a list pretty quickly?
Yes.
Are you content that it doesn't come back to the committee for consideration? The decision is made.
It's going to be a handful, but I think we should.
Yeah.
If we can.
It may well be raised through, consulting with some of the umbrella groups, might be able to identify with people that they will engage with directly, and the people that maybe sit outside their umbrella will still be aware of. So,
okay. Fair enough. So, is everybody happy with that caveat with what was proposed in terms of the inquiry time frame and the consultation and citizen space? Okay, thank you. So back to the previous conversation then, just in relation to, because some members, Declan and others, had made suggestions with regard to writing to the Executive Office, TO and DAERA Minister, just outlining again the committee's decision making and our decision making regardless of whether or not the regulation under consideration relates to a reserved matter or not. We might also, as a committee, want to review our procedures. So, as I say, in light of the difficulties today, what we normally do is invite departmental officials if we have to make a decision and call them forward. If we need them, we could just tighten that up and formally invite the relevant departmental officials to the committee. So it's not, it's more formal and they have to come.
Yeah, I think sorry, just through the chair. I mean, the issue with this is it goes to whether this committee is suitably qualified to make the decision process as it goes through, and we don't, because we don't have that degree of information. But the degree of information is held by the relevant departments within the sort of the Northern Ireland Executive. So unless there is a duty and responsibility for them to respond to issues, because we don't have that level of, we have raised, but, for the areas of expertise, unless that is laid down, I mean, I'm very surprised. I was coming in here to listen to what DAERA were going to tell me, and I was going to go amazed all about sort of Bushmills, and there's other great products of whiskey, but I've never heard of them. That's what I thought we were going to be doing today. I find I'm actually quite disquieted by the sort of the approach that the department has taken. And if you look at what other departments have done, even so far, they've responded to our information. So I think it needs to be sort of clarified, and maybe clarification is the wrong word. It needs to be
Reinforced.
I'm not very happy about what's happened today, to be honest, Chair.
John, can I just establish? Sorry.
Trying to get on for a while.
Yep.
Sorry, Declan.
To go back to what I said earlier before we had the conversation around whether or not to carry out the inquiry, it's not a question of capacity, to make that point. The issue of capacity was raised with TEO officials when they came in here several weeks ago at the outset of this committee starting its work. So I think in the communication with the Executive Office, we need to go back, revisit that conversation, because we did ask that appropriate mechanisms and appropriately resourced mechanisms were going to exist within each department to allow precisely for this kind of turnaround. Officials to attend, provide information, and also when we're receiving information in presented form, that it would be consistent regardless of from what department it was coming. And however that is done, Philip, by yourself and the committee clerk, I think either correspondence or a direct meeting, we do need reassurance that the necessary processes have been applied across all departments to ensure that we do have consistency of presentation of information, and then consistency in relation to the expectation of attendance and engagement with the committee upon request.
Go on.
Yeah, I was just going to add to that, Chairman, if I may, which is that the Minister may be unaware that this has happened and that that decision has been taken. So it may also be worthwhile to copy that correspondence to the head of the Civil Service to make sure that the Civil Service is very clear what the expectations and processes are.
So what we're going to do, what I think what people are suggesting, we write the head of civil service, the TEO, and the DAERA minister in relation to kind of what's outlined today, just to reinforce what their duty is with regard to providing this committee with information as and when requested to allow us to do our job, and also then that we tighten up in future in scenarios like this where we formally invite officials from the relevant department to come to committee, and we don't allow that wriggle room of sitting in the public gallery as and when needed. Unfortunately, that might come back to Declan's point, actually into their burden, but it's a burden then they would have caused. Go on.
Chair, it's just clarity on that point, and it's a question born of naivety, I think, because I'm new to the committee. But are you saying then that the invitation wouldn't have necessarily formally went asking DAERA to provide evidence that they were invited to be in the public gallery? Is that?
No. What we do when we get notified of an amended EU regulation, as we did last Thursday, we have two processes that we need to do to inform us about whether we have an inquiry. One is we assess legal opinion, and the second one is we write to the department. They have 5 days to respond to us in terms of the impact that amended EU legislation will have on the communities here in the north, and that's clearly what we didn't get today. So we are expected to have a written response. What we have been doing on top of that is inviting officials to come and sit in the public gallery and to be called forward on the basis of their written response. I mean, Declan made the point, you know, if for example, they write and say to us, this has no impact whatsoever, we're unlikely to call the officials forward, but we weren't even given that opportunity today because we didn't get any response from them in terms of the impact. So what we're just going to do from now on, if people agree, is formally invite officials regardless of what the impact may or may not be.
Can I just come back on that, Chair? Is that okay? Well, I mean, I just think it's important for the record that there was a response in our table pack. It didn't provide a detailed assessment of impact, but the department did come back to the committee, and I think that's important just to note.
Chairman, the issue is value of the correspondence. The committee has a very clear remit. The committee has two very clear questions that it poses to departments, and there's a response that we expect. So I understand that the member is conscious of the minister and the department, but the minister may not be aware. This committee has procedures, and we've got to follow our processes. So it's not about having a go because it happens to be DAERA in this circumstance. It could be anybody. The issue is all of the ministers and all of the departments need to be clear. We've got really tight time frames and we need to get the answers laid out in a specific way. So it's not about having a go at anybody in particular. It's like, look, we need this process ironed out. So where it doesn't happen, we need to fire the warning shot that says, no, there are expectations, there are parameters, it's very clear. We've discussed it with all of you, now it needs to come forward.
Also, the member wouldn't necessarily know, but because he's a new member of the committee, but it's not the first time that members of the committee have raised that we need significant information from the departments, because this issue's come up generally before.
Across all departments.
Yeah.
Yes.
Just to close that point out, if I will, Chair, and look, I appreciate that and respect that, and look, it is DAERA on this occasion, and no doubt it will be another department on a different day, and it isn't a political point actually that I'm making. My point is that there is a genuine issue that has been thrown up around EU exit where this committee has been established and we are scrutinising areas that may fall under the responsibility of UK government departments, and that does create a tension which is difficult to manage, and that is my point, that we need to find a way to square that circle, because it may not always be that our local department is best placed to actually provide the evidence that we need.
Okay, I think we've concluded that discussion. Everybody's happy. So next item, number 7, proposed committee visit to Brussels and London. So can I refer members to the relevant paper, page 188 of the meeting pack? Can I ask Sinead to speak to this?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Members, I circulated this proposed itinerary a few weeks ago. So we've drawn up a plan taking into account sort of logistical issues that members raised when we discussed it before. So it's proposed that we travel week beginning Monday the 10th of June, leaving, so allowing for members to be available for the Monday plenary. So leaving Parliament Buildings Monday evening for an overnight stay in Dublin for the first flight out to Brussels on the Tuesday morning. So we'll essentially have a half day in Brussels on the Tuesday, a full day on the Wednesday, and then leaving the Wednesday evening for London, with a full day on the Thursday, the 13th of June, for our engagements in London, leaving on Thursday evening. So back to Parliament Buildings on the Thursday evening. I know that some members have sort of logistical issues that we might need to kind of come up with an individual plan, so we can talk about that separately if that's the case.
Can I just ask, on Thursday, if we need to have a meeting?
Yes, so we will be scheduling a formal meeting of the committee in Westminster.
Okay.
Excellent.
Steve?
Just for a quick one, thank you very much indeed. And that looks like a really good programme. Is there any way, sort of through the chair, maybe get in contact with Aidan Conley and maybe having an hour with the committee to go and talk to maybe the Norwegian delegation, because they're in a very similar situation to us, and it might be useful for us to just get a sense of how they deal with some of the issues. And it wouldn't be a full, it might just be they could explain their processes and the rest of it, because unofficially I've had that back and forth a couple of times, and it actually explains the enormous difficulties that even a country the size of Norway has of dealing with a lot of these issues. And it might be something that might be useful that evening, or something to do with that. But I don't want to put too much burden on you, but again, through the chair, if the committee were in agreement, maybe talking with sort of Aidan Conley to see if he could organise that.
Yes, I've had initial discussions with the Executive Office in Brussels, and they're looking at sort of what the programme looks like, so we can certainly talk to them about that if that's.
Yeah. It'd just be useful for our own. It will give a differing perspective, and I think sort of David, you'll be aware of the sort of the differing perspectives. But I think it would be quite useful if we're going to be in Brussels anyhow to do that.
Okay, so can I just ask that everybody who hasn't already contacted Sinead just contact Sinead about availability?
Chairman, seeing now that the membership of the committee has changed, are we still, because following, whenever it was kind of agreed, then we had further discussion around it, and there was consideration given to just heading out potentially on the Sunday night and being ready to start our meetings on Monday, and missing the plenary. Obviously Thursday's going to be Thursday's difficult for me because of the Justice Committee, but also if I'm missing out on the entirety of the London kind of learning, then I'm only getting half of the learning of everybody else. So in that respect, I'm better not to have any, I think, than miss out on what is it, the other half of the equation.
I'm going to ask Sinead to come in. This, my own view is I think we're probably too far down the line in terms of the work that Sinead has done in preparation for this. We're not overly far away from June the 11th. So Sinead, do you want to come in on that?
Yeah, I mean, Joanne, the option is that you could join remotely maybe for part of the Thursday, if that's, we could bring you in remotely on any meetings that you have before Justice Committee in the afternoon.
I'm just conscious of how things panned out when we had our remote meeting with the Lords and so on previously, and the signal in Westminster was inordinately difficult. But I think if the itinerary is set, I think just count me out. I think is probably best.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. So moving on, item number 8. So information papers on EU matters. Can I refer everybody to the information papers prepared by the EU Affairs Team, page 190-203, and they cover the EU law making process, consultation in the EU law making process and governance of the withdrawal agreement. These papers will be published on the committee webpage. Item number 9, correspondence.
Chair, just then. Sir, on my behalf, and I don't know all the committee members, could we thank Ray's? So that's an excellent piece of work. But it's an excellent piece of work that shouldn't just be kept to us. Okay. Can we? I know we'll publish it, but could we make it more known to members? Because look, that's the first time I've seen in a couple of pages ready reckoner where all the processes are, and I normally shuffle through about 50 or 60 different pages and all the stuff that's been pushed about David Finnemore and all the rest. That's a really good piece of work, I think that would be very useful if all MLAs knew where it was and actually read it.
Ray's do great work, but they can't take the credit for this. It was the EU Affairs.
Well, in that case,
So we'll pass on their thanks. We'll obviously highlight this on our own social media. And Clerk, you want to?
Yeah, we could also, it's on the committee webpage, it's under the useful resources, so probably could send that out via the post box to all MLAs.
Yeah, I just
Sort of giving them the link and telling them what information is included. That's no problem.
Again, through the chair, it just means it stopped me having to explain to members of my party. Just I read the thing. Right.
Okay. Correspondence 9.1, correspondence between the House of Lords, EU Affairs Subcommittee on the Windsor Framework and the Minister for AI and Intellectual Property. It's at page 205, meeting pack, regarding a regulation on the protection of GI for craft and industrial products. Just to remind everybody, the applicability motion in the regulation was negative in the Assembly on the 19th of March. Are members content to note the correspondence? 9.2, response from the Speaker is at page 209 of the meeting pack regarding the resource to support the work of the committee. Are members content to note? Okay. 9.3 from the National Office for Animal Health, page 212 of the meeting pack, is regarding impact on the Windsor Framework on veterinary medicinal product availability and animal health and welfare here in the north. Can I ask, in line with the committee's agreed protocol, members content to forward the correspondence on to Committee for Agriculture, Environment and Rural Affairs and advise that organisation accordingly? Joanne?
Can I come in this one, please?
Yep.
Yeah, I think that's fair enough. Send it on to the committee. However, this is not within our remit, but it's within the remit of others, and I'm wondering about the value of sending it on to the House of Lords Scrutiny Committee and the Commons Scrutiny Committee to flag it up to them, because what they're saying is they're getting zero response from the government, they're getting zero response from the EU, and they're all being less than helpful. But I think all of us would be concerned about the animals in Northern Ireland and their well-being. But it's not for the remit of this committee yet. So I think that we should take steps that need to be taken, and it's not just for sending it to our own committee, but for sending it on to other people who maybe can G up the other bodies.
Jonathan Munson.
Jonathan?
Thank you, Chair. And it's just to follow up on Joanne's point, I do think there actually maybe is an active working group in the House of Commons in relation to this as well. So I think they would obviously need to be notified of it. I'm sure they're aware of the concerns, but just that it's come to us.
Okay. I mean, I think what we can do is send it to the department and CC some of those other groups and committees if people are happy. Okay. So 9.4, corresponds again from an individual. This time, page 214 of the meeting pack, seeking clarification on pet travel requirements between Scotland and here. Again, as in line with our agreed protocol, members content to forward the correspondence to the Committee for Agriculture, Environment and Rural Affairs and advise the individual accordingly. Okay. No chair's business. Number 11, Ian Gruella, any other business?
Another bay.
But do you have?
What was it, sir?
Do you have some?
No.
Okay.
I heard him say something earlier on.
That you had.
No, I think I raised it at the start.
All right, okay.
Okay. Date, time and place of next meeting. Next meeting of the committee is scheduled for next Thursday, 9th of May, 10 a.m, room 30. Are members content that given the May Day bank holiday, meeting packs are going to be issued on Tuesday instead of Monday next week?
Yeah.
Okay, meeting's adjourned. Rather.
Committee Room 30. Sound.